Yeah, I've always thought that the 49ers identity under Kyle Shanahan has been a dominant, strong defense, a dominant run game, and physical an overall like mindset of physicality
Yeah.
and like all outness. I often when I'm trying to explain this think of Brandon Ayuk. Like the reason he was in the doghouse was because he like didn't practice hard enough. Like that's how serious they took like I need 110% from all guys at all times if you want to be starting mindset. And so it's shocking. Like when I was watching the first half of the defense on Sunday against the Bengals, I found it shocking the effort. And to me, do you think that that boils down to like a flaw in the coaching and motivation? I know a lot of people have talked about Steve Wilkes moving to the sideline. I actually don't think that that would make this giant difference because I imagine his mentality would probably be similar, even if he was on the sideline. I think a reason to do that would potentially be like Kyle Shanahan able to communicate with him better. But I think fans are hoping for that D'Amico Ryans, Robert Saleh like energy that would potentially spark some motivation within that. I think that's going to have to come from the players themselves. Maybe Fred Warner. He does look a little bit injured. This is like kind of random, but all these players have podcasts now. So I was listening to his podcast that he does with his wife, and he like really talked about being tired and really run down. And but he also talked about being mad and needing to come back and needing players to do what they like. He talked about everyone needing to do different things over this bye week to make sure that they came back in the mindset that they needed to come back in. But I think that maybe that morale will have to come like player wise from a shift. But how do you feel about this team's identity right now this year? I think starting out it was kind of shocking because it was more offensively dominant, and then now that the offense isn't you know scoring 30 points, people are kind of pointing fingers at the defense and saying this is all your fault. When up until the Bengals game, they hadn't given up more than 24 points. Now, obviously, that Bengals game was not ideal, but
Yeah. No, you made some good points. Under head coach Kyle Shanahan, this has been a team that has been physical. And we talked so much last year about how when the Niners played a team, the team the following week lost. And I'm pretty sure every team almost after they played the Niners in 2022 ended up losing the following week. They were beat up. The Niners can really wear you down with their physicality. And part of the reason why I've been so bothered by this 3-game losing streak is that they've kind of strayed away from that identity. Now, when you don't have Trent Williams and Deebo Samuel, those are two players that embody that type of identity. Trent Williams is throwing cats out of the club, right? Deebo Samuel will not just run over you, he will run through you and then he'll look back and laugh at you. Like
they are the
that type
emotional
of
heartbeat of
mentality
the
is
team.
very, very unique. And it's that type of physical approach that makes this Niners team so feared, or at least has been. And defensively, they've been able to get after the quarterback. And with that linebacking core, Fred Warner and Drake Greenlaw, they range sideline to sideline. They have this unbelievable speed. You have Hufanga on the back end who will light you up as well. But 32 missed tackles over 3 games is absolutely unacceptable. That comes down to execution. That comes down to focus. That comes down to effort. And usually under Shanahan, we haven't had to worry about effort. Now, I am a little bit worried because Shanahan even said, we look beat up and slow against the Bengals. You think about how much football this team has played. 3 NFC championship games in the last 4 years. A lot of these core players have been a part of that, back-to-back NFC championship games. And they really had to fight their way in both of those years. They started 3-5 in 2021. They started 3-4 last year, and they were playing catch up. Now, I guess glass half full approach is that you have a little bit of wiggle room, but Seattle's right on your ass now. Seattle's a really good team in this division. So I think that the Niners can
And
get
you
back to
wanted
that
to
identity. And I hope that they do with the week away and they come back refreshed a little bit, because I'm with you, Ashley. I do think that they've looked beat up and they've looked a little bit slower, and that's taken away from the great Niner team that we've seen over the last couple of years.
I love that you mentioned that because in that referencing that podcast again, Fred Warner also said that like he said you don't realize how much extra games you have when you keep making it this far in the playoffs, but then
Yep.
not making the whole thing and the emotional toll that that has on these players. I've also heard George Kittle kind of talk about that when it comes to not having maybe a stable quarterback position and just like getting beat up over the season compared to other teams, he's mentioned, well, this team keeps, we're playing basically a whole entire extra season if you were to add up all these games that we keep playing, if we were to just lose the first round of the playoffs versus now, which that does worry me when we talk about like, okay, they've been 3-5 before and they've been able to like pull themselves together mentality wise. It's like, how much can one team or one core take? Like, how many times can you like build yourself up and then kind of get beaten down? And now, because now after coming out of this bye week, they kind of have that pressure of, we have to go on a win streak again. We have to do this again. And if we're not getting the number 1 seed, we're not going to get a break again. I wonder if there's like, I wonder how many times you can miss the ultimate goal before you start kind of crumbling with inside themselves, because the 49ers have always done a great job of like sticking together no matter, who maybe was more responsible for a single loss or something. You always saw this unity within the team, and that was really high in the beginning of the season when everyone was winning. But now that people have been losing, Kyle Shanahan was publicly calling out Wilkes in press conferences, not really taking responsibility for that blitzing call until like 4 days later on a radio. Nick Bosa, when asked about his sack production, kind of talked about the scheme and Steve Wilkes. And on that Fred Warner's podcast, Fred Warner's wife went in on Jake Moody, and I was pretty shocked that was like, and to be fair, like Fred Warner was like, oh, don't say that, but it's like one of those things where I feel like she wouldn't say that if they hadn't like talked like that together,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well,
so
look, I mean,
I do wonder, does that cause like a breakdown among like the brotherhood if there continues to be struggles? Like, how long can you fight through that as a?
I don't think there's a breakdown in brotherhood, because I think that this team is really close knit, and I think that they have the right people in the building to turn this thing around. But let's be honest. I mean, the Niners, the last 2 years without making it to the Super Bowl, have played 40 games, whereas other teams in a 17-game schedule have played a maximum of 34 if they didn't make the playoffs. That's 6 extra games. That's a lot. And we as a society, we talk about fall depression. We talk about us being in a tough spot. I know from following you on Twitter, you're going through some things. I've been through some heartaches. When you have to deal with that as a person, you struggle to like maintain energy on some days.
Yeah.
When you're down, when you're sad, when you're beat up mentally and physically, you're just not the same person. Can you imagine playing 40 football games the last 2 years? Your body's starting to feel it a little bit, and then you have to continue to go out there and get physically manhandled in a very physical game, and then you miss out on that ultimate goal. So there's the physical aspect of it, and then it's the heartbreak, it's the mental, and it's what's inside of you. It's like, man, we probably should have won a Super Bowl during this stretch. We've come so close. You think about all the plays that you didn't make. That's a lot to take in as a human being, right? And we don't factor that in enough, that these athletes are human beings. They feel it mentally, emotionally, but of course physically as well. And when you combine all that for a football player, that's got to be a lot to bear.